Un, deux, trois, quatre. Hello and welcome to Plot Twisters.
This is a podcast where we take movies and twist the plot to see if we can make them better, and if not, classier.
At the moment, we're talking about teen movies from the 90s.
On this episode, Slums of Beverly Hills from 1998.
I'm Anders, and I got the part! Sky Masterson is mine!
I'm Emma. Dingbats! That's what they're called. Dingbats. Dingbats?
Dingbats. You know,
Dingbats.
There's sometimes it's good to be punchy, right? Why?
It's good to be
Why
punchy,
pick a big old long quote when you could just choose the word Dingbats?
One of my favorite words.
Hey,
I think.
Did you know I learned a thing? I didn't actually know they were called Dingbats until this movie, and then when you texted me and said, "Look at the Dingbats," and I said, my immediate reaction was, "Is that thing from in Star Wars where they are in the meteor place and they go into that tunnel, and that tunnel isn't a tunnel, but it's a big worm and there's bats everywhere?"
That's what you thought?
Immediately. Wow. And holy, that's the image.
Here's what I like about that assumption. I like the fact that when there's a word that I say that you don't know what it is, you assume it's a Star Wars thing. Even if we're talking about another movie that we both just watched, you still assume it's a Star Wars thing. And I want to say you were on the money with that. That is the correct instinct to have. Keep it up.
Exactly. Boba Fett indeed. Sarlacc. R2.
Yep.
You know what I like when sometimes
Luke Skywalker
and his dad, who turned into like a bad guy, and they cut his legs off, and he was in that volcano. And everyone was like, "No, man!"
Oh, it's another volcano movie.
Yeah. And then
the volcano movies, Star Wars,
exactly,
Lord of the Rings,
and then and then Obi-Wan's like, "You were supposed to be the good guy, not the bad guy." Dang.
Whoa, plot twist. That's what he says in the film.
Yeah.
Here's what I like about Dingbats and their kind of their place in the existence of our discussion about this movie and its movie. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of stuff in this film which I think would be the first thing that people would say about this film, if you know what I mean.
Wink, wink. I think I know what you mean.
Wink. There's a lot of stuff in this film where like you go to the pub after watching it. Like you go to the cinema. Yeah. Remember that?
With your friends, having a good time, popcorn.
That you're allowed to see and it's not illegal. Yeah. Go to the cinema, you hang out, you go to the pub afterwards. What are the kind of top line things that you're going to discuss, right? There's definitely some things in here which I think would really stand out. Uh-huh. And the place that I go to
is Dingbats.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, the place I went to was the interesting references to Charles Manson in this movie. So neither of us went for the top line.
We're both innocent
I know.
Kids.
I mean, listen, we'll talk about it in a second, but we'll breeze over it. Yeah. I didn't cover my eyes, although there were moments when I wanted to shy away because whilst I've grown to the age of a grown-upness, there's things, and I'm like, not comfortable with that. Comfortable with that. Should we recap the movie?
Yeah. This film is about a family living in Beverly Hills, and they are essentially living a kind of nomadic lifestyle. This is due to the fact that the dad, Murray, he divorced his wife, and he is just kind of that kind of guy where he has like things coming up and this might work out and this might happen and I might get money doing this. And as a result of this, him and his family, his daughter Vivian, Natasha Lyonne, and his sons travel around, and they go to various different places in Beverly Hills. Yeah. And this is kind of where we see them. We see them leaving one specific house to move into another one. They move around a few times. Various things kind of happen to them as this is going on. The main kind of conflict is between the dad, Murray, and his brother, Mickey. They call Uncle Mickey, right?
Yeah.
Which is that he is borrowing money off him. His daughter has kind of had a pretty rough life and is not doing very well. And she's 29, So she needs to kind of be set on the right path.
Right.
And Murray volunteers to do that if his brother will pay for him to live in a nice place. So him and his family move into a nice flat, the nicest place they've lived for a really long time. And then we have this kind of thing going on, which is that they need to look after Rita and keep her on the right track in order to keep getting money from his brother. During all of this, Vivian is going through a couple of different things. She's going through like insecurity about her body. She's doing things with boys. She's trying to kind of manage this relationship with Rita, who, like I said, is older than her and who is, you know, a bit of a wild card. And it's difficult for her. And she's also got this family that is kind of constantly moving. You know, one of the first things that we see is her being woken up in the middle of the night to move to this next place. So it's a very kind of, like I said, nomadic lifestyle that they go through. And it's quite like, there's a few different snapshots of different things happening. And then towards the end, it falls apart a bit. Whereas Rita kind of goes off the rails again. They get kicked out. But the difference is that they form a kind of stronger connection at the end. So it's quite like a muted conclusion to the film, which I think some people could have criticized, but I personally really liked. So yeah, and that's it. It's just a story about this family roaming around trying to figure things out, basically.
Pretty much. And you know, man, I loved how it looked. Didn't you love the aesthetic of this movie?
It looks great.
Not just the Dingbats, but I'm talking LA in the 70s.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. And I think even they were trying to show like a sort of grittier part or a less affluent and beautiful part of Los Angeles, of California, but it was still really cool looking. I was soaking it up.
Well,
man.
I think that's it's an interesting thing. So diving back into the Dingbats.
Yeah.
So for our listeners who may not know, the word Dingbats, what they actually apply to is a very specific kind of house that was built at a very specific time in a very specific place. Right? They are kind of like usually 2-story apartment buildings that could be thrown up really, really quickly and have a very specific design aesthetic. It kind of fits in with like a kitsch style.
Okay.
It's like, you know, you would normally see them sort of like with a flat top, and then they'd have something like Flamingo Heights or Sunset Valley written on it. And because they were so cheap to make, they were also really, really cheap to rent. So they were a very short-term housing solution for a lot of people when they were trying to expand Los Angeles. They aged horrifically and became really, really unpopular, like quite, you know, soon after they had their real explosion in popularity. So there's not a huge amount of them left, but they're kind of seen as like a, you know, a unique interest for some people. Some people really love them and they have like a big following, but other people think that they are, you know, exemplative of terrible like cheap spending on architecture, basically.
You know what's interesting though? So I get that. I have a relative who is who trained as an architect and knows about architecture, and he's like a guy who like we'll be walking down the street and I'll be like, hey, the pub's over there, and then he'll just stop and I'll be like, what are you looking at? And he'll be like, isn't this the intentional rust on this building just beautiful? And I'll be like, what are you talking about? Right? Oh, look at the cement. I love cement so much. And I'll be like, all right, cool, bro. Yeah. Although not for nothing, I think brutalism is actually quite beautiful, despite the name, which I think is a misnomer. But he has this theory, right? Which we've talked about, which is every generation has buildings that they think are ugly, right? No matter what, buildings that start out as popular and modern, they follow this trajectory where eventually, a decade or so or whatever, the next generation will go, that's ugly, that's gross, get rid of it. The key is, if you wait long enough, no matter what, it becomes beautiful again.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm thinking about the Dingbats, and in the 70s, they were probably, 60s and 70s, as you say, they were seen as modern and cool and, and new. And then I imagine the last 50 years, a big portion of that, people have been saying how ugly they are. But now, I bet you they're seen as really cool now.
Well, I think the interest, like, I think that you can apply that theory to a lot of things, certainly. Like, I would say fashion is a really key one.
Sure.
You know, things come in and out of fashion again. I think the interesting thing about these buildings is that it's almost like the context of them plays a really big part in what people think about them.
That's
because, you know, the lifestyle that these people have, and they talk about it a lot in the movie about like how awful they think the building is.
Right.
The reason that, you know, Los Angeles was sprawled out so massively in such a short space of time, like the suburbs were just increased so dramatically, was essentially to assist car sales, so that people would have to commute to work, right? So they just threw up all these buildings really quickly as a really short-term solution. And I think that's why people didn't... I think that's a big reason why people didn't like them, is because they were like, it's just cheap. It's just cheap nonsense. But then other people are like, oh, there's a real like uniqueness and beauty in this. So it's a really weird little... It's a really weird little thing. I think they're quite cool. I don't think they look very nice.
I think they look...
but I think they're interesting.
Fine. I really like the stylized and cool, you know, lettering on the names of the buildings and you know, and all of that. But equally, I mean, I really like the style inside the apartment. I mean, look, I'm sure it's controversial, but and I'm sure my family wouldn't super dig it, but I would have gold shag carpet in my house today. Today. It's so lush. Don't you want to take your shoes off and just get your toes in there?
When I'm really rich and I have a big house, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a different decade-themed room in every house. Different themed room for every decade. How cool would that be?
Quick, everyone, let's go have champagne in the 70s room.
Yeah, that'd be so cool.
And then no, it'd probably be like Advocat in the 70s room. And then champagne in the
avocado
90s
bathroom.
I don't know, like a highball. Or some what do they do?
Yeah, in the 1810 room.
Come and join me for some posset in the Edwardian room.
But anyway, that's Dingbats. So back to the movie. What did you think of the movie? What do you think?
Here are my thoughts.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you my thoughts, and then I want to spin it back to you, because my first thought was, I'm not super sure I know what this movie was about.
Well, that's why I asked you first.
Okay.
Because I want to know.
Here's what I'm thinking.
I want to put you under pressure to make you feel weird. What's
All right.
movie about?
Here's what this movie is about. Here's what I liked about it, and here's what it was about. It's a coming of age movie about an awkward teenager. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The specifics of which, you know, of the specific challenges that Vivian faced were different in my experience, but I related to her because universally when you're a teenager, it's awkward. So I think this movie's about being an awkward teenager, partially. I think this movie, which I liked, I think this movie is about family and you know what I kind of liked? This movie kind of reminded me of two different movies that I also liked, and they were sort of blended together in my mind, which is kind of had like a weird, almost like a Napoleon Dynamite kind of vibe to it.
Yeah, right? It was
sort of surreal and sort of like a bit off kilter, but interesting. And it also kind of reminded me of again, I'm just realizing that it might have reminded me of this movie because there was an actor who was in both of them. But it kind of reminded me of Little Miss Sunshine.
Yeah.
Right? Two movies about weird families who are different in a way and have a different perspective on life than others around them. But they're also have conflict, but then they grow to come together a little bit more in the end. And at the end of the movie, you're like, what happened in this movie? It was weird because it was like a confusing indie movie.
Yeah.
And I liked Natasha Lyonne.
Yeah. We stand.
Can you explain this movie to me though? Because I'm asking for a friend. I said earlier I didn't. I got it. I get it, right? I understand what this movie is about. But just in case, because for a friend of mine, they said, would you mind asking Emma what this movie was about? Don't tell them who I was. They're embarrassed. I'm asking. I'm asking her. Hang on. Be quiet first. I'm asking. All right. So my friend wants to know what this movie was about.
Hey, can you get your friend to come over?
She wants to talk to you. Okay. Hey, what's this movie about? Do you know I watched it and I didn't understand it, but I know it's about something. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I've never been on one of them. Is it on the radio now?
What's your name?
Is it on the radio? Sorry, what did you say? Is it on the radio?
What's your name?
Clint Nansen. I'm from a different place. I came here my friend said we're watching the movie and we watched it.
I'm from a different place, not this place, somewhere else I came from.
I came from a different... Gosh, shoot, dang, don't you like Natasha Lyonne? What's this movie about? My name's Clinton.
Clinton. Hi, Clinton. Let me explain this movie to you.
Howdy. Thank you. Please and thank you. Peas and carrots. Goodbye. I'm listening, but I'm leaving.
Nice to meet you. See you later. Off he goes. Oh, look at that. He's getting on his horse.
Bye.
Oh, and he's riding away. Oh, and he slipped. Oh, is he okay?
He's fine.
He's back on the horse. He's riding away.
I don't want to be that guy, but Clemson's kind of a drama queen, you know?
Yeah, he kind of seemed a bit, I didn't want to say because he's your friend, but he kind of seems like the worst.
Guess what? I just met the guy. We don't even know each other.
Wait, what?
We met earlier. It was a whole thing. His horse threw a shoe. I said I can help you. We got to talking. It turned out we have a lot in common. We're not...
Including the fact that you both just seen this same film.
We watched it together.
You said, hi, nice to meet you. Come and watch a film with me right now.
I mean, if you want to reduce our conversation to the bare minimum, yes, that did happen. We met. His horse threw a shoe. I said I could help. We talked. We connected. We bonded. Yeah. Turns out we have a lot of things in common. Then I said, I'm about to watch a movie for the podcast. That movie is Slums of Beverly Hills. He said, well, I've never seen it. I can't do his voice. And then we went to my house and watched the movie, shoed the horse, chewed the fat. Yeah. He didn't get it. I did. I said,
and then his horse died, and then you both flogged a dead horse for a bit, which I think is what...
This is what we're doing now. Emma, what was this movie about? I'd like to know from me because I didn't understand it. You happy now?
Oh, I get it. Ah, shame. My read of this movie is that it is about a person's experience.
Whose experience?
Just someone's, you know? Does that help?
Is it about Alan Arkin's experience?
Well, so what I mean by that is, I think, yeah. Whose experience do you think? You think he's the main character?
Well, I mean, in a way, he is. The story is about him and his ex-wife. They split up. He takes the kids. He's trying to prove himself, but he's kind of like a guy who he's always got an answer. He's always got an angle. He's always got a deal, some sort of a grift going. But he's always running away from his problems. So in a way, I think this movie is about Murray.
Interesting. He certainly has more of a direct, kind of understandable plot line than Vivian, who's the main character.
She's the main character.
Is the title character, I should say. Well, not title.
She's the top of the. She's number one on the. She's number one on the call list.
So it's interesting because you could almost say that it is Murray's story being told through the lens of his daughter. Yeah, certainly. Yeah. I guess what I mean by I think it's a person's experience is I think that the writer probably was writing about something that they experienced. I don't know that for a fact. I did try to look actually, and I couldn't find an answer to this. So if anyone is better at Googling than I am, let me know. It's a writer-director, Tamara Jenkins. Yeah. And the thing about films like this, and Tamara Jenkins also hasn't done a huge amount of stuff.
Right.
From my perspective, films like this, which are indie films, which are very specific story about quite an unusual experience, you can usually tie to something that the writer went through. This feels like a really personal story to me. The one I wanted to I thought to compare it to would be Reality Bites, which we know was also quite a personal story from a writer-director. So it's like you can kind of pick up on these elements of feeling like there are both these general themes and these feelings of like, you know, awkwardness and feeling sort of disjointed and feeling like you're not really settled anywhere. But then also these very, very specific moments like being fitted for a bra, you know, hooking up with a boy in the laundry room.
Right.
Those things, they felt like real things that really happened to someone. So I would be really interested to know if that was the case and if that is something that Tamara Jenkins was writing about herself, or she was, you know, if not necessarily herself, things that she'd been around or experienced.
Yeah.
And, you know, like we've talked about this before. I think there's other movies that, like Empire Records was another one. That was one that was somebody's really personal experience that they went through. And I think often that can make for a film that does leave you feeling a bit like, I'm not entirely sure what happened there. And I think part of the reason for that is because when you are writing about a really personal experience, you can end up with a film that does feel like a bunch of snapshots because you're writing about, you know, events that you want to explore. Whereas if you're writing something because you had an idea for a situation for a film, that's a different thing. Like, because that's often what films are. It's just a character is in a situation and that situation changes. You know, that's what a script for a film is. This person started off like this, and then this happened, and now they're like this, right?
Yeah.
When it's a bit more autobiographical, that change will probably, I think, be a lot smaller. Yeah. Because if you're writing about your own experience, it's a lot more difficult to reflect on a massive change because that doesn't really happen to people. You know, it's very rare that you suddenly something happens to you and you totally change. If you're just writing about your life as a kid, it was probably small changes that made a difference over time. That's my interpretation anyway. That might be complete rubbish, but that's what I thought.
No, I think you might be onto something. There's a couple thoughts I have, which the first of which is, you get movies. I really like that. When you're like, oh yeah, this movie's about, remember when you were like, hey, you know that movie Jaws? It's not about the shark. It's about like man's struggle or whatever. And I was like, what are you talking about? That movie's about a shark. But I get it. This movie seems to be based on the writer-director's limited sort of, you know, catalog. It had to have been. It was too specific.
It was very specific.
Very specific. Who would write a movie about, you know, a small group of people that move from apartment to apartment in Beverly Hills in the 70s and starting and ending and circulating around, you know, stories about their father and steak and the restaurant he used to run in New York. And, you know, it was a whole thing. It reminded me of, there's a thing that happens where something can be both universal and, you know, you're following along and you're like, I can relate to this, but then it like something so specific happens that you go, I don't know what they're talking about, that's too niche. I was listening to a randomly generated playlist of music the other day that I think was referred to as Chill Sunday or some nonsense like that, was like chill vibes music, you know?
Yeah.
So, exactly. And there were some lo-fi beats.
To study/relax to.
Exactly. The girl's been studying forever. But also there was a song that I'd never heard before that I both simultaneously thought was great and also didn't like at all. And I think you've helped me understand why. Which is, so there's a song by a musician called Matt Alber, which is called House on Fire. I don't expect you've heard it. I'd never heard it before. It uses this phrase that's like, we get on like a house on fire. That's the chorus.
Yes.
Have you heard that phrase before?
I have. And
I never really got it. And I was like, hey, our relationship is what? Like all of the things that I love burning to ashes. But I'm led to believe that it's like, you know, we get on really quickly, like a burning house, right?
Yeah, it burns down quickly. Yeah. Just catches.
And all of the lyrics are really universal, and it's like two people who get on really well, you know? But then there's this one line that just really got me, and I didn't understand what happened, and I've listened to the song a couple times since, and it's still, I don't get it, okay? Right? We get on like a house on fire. Yeah, we get on like a house on fire. Fine. And then the line goes, you keep your robots in the kitchen, and I wind them up while you're away. And I'm waiting for somebody to listen. You're waiting for someone to stay. Sweet. What about the robots? Tell me more about the robots. Right? And I imagine that this is a songwriter writing specifically about their life and their
I think I can draw some meaning from that.
Do you have robots in your kitchen?
No.
In the hallway, in the bedroom,
here's what I
the
think.
kitchen.
Here's my quick fire straight away analysis reaction.
All right.
I think that what that means is that it's about somebody's automated way of existence and the habits that they go through and the things that they just do in daily life without really thinking about it. And, you know, keep your robots in the kitchen is like you just get on with things and you just try and get through life and you don't really think about it much. And then the person who winds them up is helping you to kind of just carry on.
Hang
with
on.
your day.
You don't think that they were talking specifically about wind-up robot toys? But actually it was an analogy, a metaphor for routine?
Symbolism.
Damn.
I think so.
Wow. Hang on. So the robots are like the Jaws the shark. And the metaphor is that it's not about the robots, but it's about
this is what's interesting, isn't it? We went through this exercise in our episode for a Goofy movie, where we were talking about stripping something. This is not the time to be goofy. We're being serious now.
This is a very serious movie.
This is not a goofy movie. This is a serious movie. We were talking about how if you really want to understand something and understand why it connects with people, you should strip it down to its most basic level.
Mm-hmm.
With a film like this, I think that is really hard to do because there isn't one very clear theme.
Yeah.
There are lots of them. Because you could say, oh, it's about the fact that it's a young girl who feels awkward, but she's in a really unique situation. You know, not many people, certainly that I know, live the way that she lives and moves house every 3 months. And I would imagine that would be the case for a lot of the audience of this film.
Yeah.
You could say it's about the fact that, you know, like you said, the father is relying on his brother and he feels indebted to him. Again, that's not really a very universal experience either, I would say, to be feeling like you are reliant on someone else as an older person. You know, I guess you could say there's something about capitalism there, but I don't know. So it's like if we really strip it down and kind of go, what is the really core thing at the bottom of this? Because that's quite muddy and it's quite hard to find, I think that's what leaves you with that sense of, so what was this film about at the end of it? Because that exact feeling that you've described, you know, which is as valid as me saying, oh, I think it was about this, because movies are meant to be watched by a range of people. They're not meant to just be watched by people who have, you know, studied film, right? So it's like, if you have left the film going, oh, I didn't really get that, that isn't your failing. That's the film's failing. Because you should understand. And I think that is the criticism of this film, is that it's like many other films that are very specific about really specific experiences and usually have that kind of indie, slightly more fractured storyline.
Yeah.
If you're spending the whole movie going, I don't really get this.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Yeah, no,
right?
yeah, completely. I mean, and like, you know, listen, I do love an indie film. I mean, we've talked about my very deep and meaningful Parker Posey phase that I had in my life, right? And she was deemed the indie queen, right? Of the 90s anyway. Maybe the one bit right at the end, I found myself saying, hang on, what was this movie about? Up until the point when Natasha Lyonne said, I used to think that the good life was somewhere just outside the window of my father's car, but now I see that it's on the inside. And, you know, I don't know. You might have hit the nail on the head. Maybe the director of this film had a very similar, if not the same experience, wherein ultimately she went from thinking that life was better away from her family and realizing that actually my family's okay. I mean, wasn't that the whole point, was that she realized that she related to her dad or understood what her dad was trying to do?
definitely. And yeah, I mean, I agree that final line is the one where you would feel a bit like, oh, okay, I get it. Because that's where she's telling you what her character development was.
Right.
You know, that's literally her saying, this is how I have changed as a result of the events of this film. Usually you don't have to, you shouldn't have to tell the audience that. Like, it's nice to do it. It's nice to wrap it up that way. But usually it is more obvious. I personally was okay with that because I thought, because I did get it. And also I think there is a key point about it, which is that I could relate probably to more of the stuff in this film that happened than you could in relation to things that happen.
Yeah, and you know, we're not gonna, as we said, we're not gonna dwell on it, but like there was a lot of stuff in there that was there's a lot of biological
things.
There's some biological things happening.
Yeah.
And that centered around themes for some, but not for all. And hey, have I ever tried on a bra? Nope. Although we've talked about it before, I'm not quite sure where they clasp, and that would be, interested about the mechanism. But I don't know what it's like to have to go and have your very first one fitted by a stranger in a shop because your mom is back east and your dad is the only parent you have. And you've got some lady telling you that you should feel good about yourself, but you're young and so you don't understand yourself and you're feeling awkward about everything.
Yeah, because it's like one of those things that you can get it from a distance, but you don't like get it, you know? Yeah,
man. But I don't know. This movie for me had all the elements. I'm like, I love Natasha Lyonne. You got Mrs. Bluth, right? She's
Lucille
in this
Bluth.
Lucille Bluth is in this movie, and Marissa Tomei,
Jessica Walter,
yeah, and the guy
Mina Suvari.
Oh yeah, that's right. She shows up because why not? Oh, it's Mina Suvari. It had all the elements. It had all the aesthetics. And I know now, thinking about it, it had quite subtle but significant, story and components to it. But I guess I left that movie going, hang on, they started the movie in the car and it's over and they're back in the car again.
Yeah.
When are they going to have a real house? You can't just go to Sizzler and say everything's okay, right? I'm worried for you. All of your stuff was left in you left all your things in the middle of the night except for a hairdryer. And I don't know a lot about hair and fashion, but you have very curly hair. Why do you need a hairdryer? Don't you want to let that stuff air dry, right?
It's frizz otherwise, isn't it? That's what you want.
Oh yeah, you're always fighting it. Frizz or curls. Yeah. It's a whole thing. My point is, it felt very much like they were in the same place, and I love a good character development. I love movies that you can feel and taste and see and smell that person has changed. They were one way and they're another way. This movie, as you say, if she hadn't said that at the end of the movie, oh, I used to think good stuff was on the outside. Now I know it's in my dad's car.
Well, yeah, I think I imagine that you wouldn't be alone in that opinion. I think a lot of people would feel that way. And there is a certain element where you see them getting back in the car and they're driving away after they've kind of had a bit of a crescendo, but then it all falls apart. I'm sure a lot of people watch that be like, oh, what? But what happened? Is there no happy ending? I personally kind of enjoy a quite nihilistic ending of like, there is no happy ending.
Do you like it when movies end sad?
Sometimes I think that like it's really hard because it does depend what you want to get out of a film, I guess, doesn't it? A lot of the times people watch films because they want to feel better.
That's
and
why
if that's
I watch them.
If that's what you want, then you do want a happy ending. But even with a sad ending, what you get is something. You feel something, and it can feel cathartic, and it can feel emotional and healing and cleansing and all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
But when the film ends in a very kind of like, Waiting for Godot-esque sort of just sort of tails off way, I think people can find that really frustrating, and it is something that I think writers do try. Well, I can't speak for writers here, but you're sort of directed away from doing. I kind of like it when it's done well. I like it because I think it does undermine that feeling of like, oh, everything always works out for everyone. Because sometimes
it doesn't.
Sometimes life is an endurance test. Sometimes it's a marathon, not a sprint. And movies can make you feel like big dramatic events will happen to you and then everything will change. And that's just not what life is like at all. Life is just a series of small, minute things that eventually change you, I'm getting very philosophical.
No, man, hey, you know what?
That's kind of what it made me think about.
Maybe that's what makes this movie so cool, is that it was filmed it came out in 1998, and it was a movie that had a very subtle lesson and a subtle progression, right?
And it's not a subtle film. It's very interesting. It's a subtle lesson.
Right?
But yeah.
And like, that's unique because this felt more like something you'd see in a TV drama now, not 25 years ago.
Yeah.
When films, this is a moment in time where we're seeing Minu Suvari in this right before she's in American Beauty, and we're seeing Natasha Lyonne before or just after she was in American Pie. Both films that came out around the same time with the same people that had big points to put across. And then here's this little film where they tried to tell a very small story in a very beautiful and interesting way. I don't know. I would love to have known what people thought of it in 1998 because it's a very niche movie.
I think I can tell you.
Tell me.
Because at least to some extent, which is that from what I have been able to research through my Googling, this film is very much liked by critics and less so by audiences. The audience ratings are not great, but the critics really liked it.
Yeah.
Which is funny because that is sometimes the way that things go. They don't always agree.
Yeah.
Which would kind of make us potentially think like, oh, well, it's a smart movie for smart people, and sometimes smart movies normal people find boring.
Yes.
I don't know. I think if I were to just give like my short review of this film and what I felt about it, I would say I loved the energy. I loved the characters. I thought they were really interesting and engaging. I think when you have really interesting and engaging characters that are being acted really well, you can just let them do whatever, and there doesn't need to be a massive driving plot behind that.
Yeah.
I thought it explored a lot of issues which I hadn't really seen in film enough, if at all.
Yeah.
Which was very cool. And obviously that's another reason why we like Natasha Lyonne so much, is because she she does that.
She does that a lot.
Good egg.
Yeah. But I'm a cheerleader, for example.
Yeah, exactly. So that was very cool. And I think it was just a cool little quirky snapshot in time with a very specific experience, but because the characters were so interesting and engaging and alive, I felt like I was really pulled in by it. So I did really like it. That's my review.
You and I like a lot of the same things in movies, so but we come at from different angles sometimes. I think this film had so much that I liked, and at the end I went, but why didn't you do more cool things?
Yeah.
Right? But hey ho, they can't all be Revenge of the Sith or whatever, right? Is that a Star Wars movie? They can't all be the Revenge of the Sith? I don't know Star Wars. They can't all be Return of the Jedi.
Okay, I was going to say, because Revenge of the Sith is the one that's not good.
Hello and remain indoors. I know 2020's been a real drag and you can't basically do anything or go anywhere. But great news, podcasts are still a thing. Our podcast is still very much a thing, and we are so happy that you're listening to it. What would make everyone's 2021 even better would be if you shared our podcast on the social medias and tagged us at Plot Twisters Pod.
You said that this film felt like it should have been a TV show for you.
100%.
I would love to take you through a bit of a screenwriting exercise here.
Yes.
And I'd like us to reshuffle it.
Yes.
And maybe twist some little details here and there to make it so that it feels like it has a big plot arc that lands.
Fabulous. I'm in. And it's still a movie, yes?
Still a movie, yeah.
Fantastic.
We could say, let's do this as a TV show, but I think we kind of covered that.
Too easy. Too easy.
We're better than that.
Anything could be a TV show, right?
Yeah.
Right? Hey, guess what? Got up today, got on the bus, went to work, and then, had a sandwich, went home. That's a TV show. You could make that a TV show.
Well, no, what that actually is that stop motion animated thing that Ben Wyatt does in Parks and
Stand
Recreation.
in the place where you live. All right? Hey, pizza? Never heard of it.
This is one of my favorite things, is when I make an incredibly obscure reference that you immediately get. So good.
That's one of my many USPs. That is in my wheelhouse. What is the thing that we need to do to make this movie exciting plot-wise?
I'm going to walk you through it.
Okay.
You're going to do it, but I'm going to help. Okay?
All right. Teach me, Obi-Wan.
I'm going to teach you, yes.
Help me, Obi-Wan. Do something, Obi-Wan.
You've been watching a lot of Star Wars recently.
What are you talking about? I don't know what you're saying. Right? I have to go to the... Hang on 1 second. I need to go to the Dagobah system. I'll be right back. I'm back. Yes. Spoiler alert. I've been watching all the Star Wars.
This is not the system you were looking for. This is not the droid.
I was going to go to the Tashi station to pick up some power converters. And other quotes like that. Walk me through it. Let's do this thing.
Okay. So, this film. Let's see if we can break it into 3. Okay?
Okay.
So, what happens in the beginning of this film? And what we're looking for is things that set up the characters and set up the story. What do we find out in the first bit of this film?
All right. Definitely you need top line. They got to move. They got to move. Don't have time to save good stuff. Get in the car. We got to go. We don't have any money. Let's get out of here.
So we know that they need to move, and we know why.
Yes.
And we know that they will be doing that. Right.
Yes.
Cool. So that's one thing.
Yes.
What about a more character-based thing?
All right.
Vivian.
We need to find out about the whole bra thing.
Yeah.
I could give you something different, but if we're keeping stuff in the movie, I think the whole bra thing makes kind of good sense. Because she experienced body confidence issues. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Which in the film lead her to go to visit a plastic surgeon. That's a pretty key thing, I would say. And what about some of the other characters? So what's a key character that kind of comes in and changes things in this film?
Well, you got Marissa Tomei.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. She just got out of rehab, man. So maybe we could emphasize the fact that she's got a drug problem. Do you remember when she listed all those drugs that she wanted? Because she super likes drugs.
She does super like drugs. It was quite sidelined. I think the idea of somebody training to be a nurse and being addicted to drugs is interesting. I don't know if it's this movie though.
She shouldn't have been a nurse. Take that out. But she definitely has a rehab. She's just left rehab, but still wants to do drugs.
Yes. So I would say the interesting thing about her character, in contrast to Vivian, is that she is not only older, she's also had her young adult life, hasn't she? Yeah. And she's kind of coming to the end of it, and she needs to grow up.
And that she almost, but not quite, fills in the sort of missing mom role. But instead of teaching her good stuff, she teaches her some bad lady things.
Okay, so what we want to do is we want to emphasize the good things about her character. And what you said there is the fact that she does provide, she provides a sense of direction as an older woman.
Yeah.
I think what you're maybe suggesting there is that we need to essentially give her a positive character arc and then kind of leave it there. So whereas in this movie, what we see is that character, what's her name again? Rita. In this movie, we see Rita go from...
Rita, mate?
She turns up, she's naked, she runs around in her underwear a lot, she's obviously on drugs.
Yeah.
And then she kind of manages to sort herself out a bit and get to the point where she's going to nursing school.
Yes.
What we then see is we see her mess it up and make a bunch of mistakes in front of her family, and then she kind of ruins it all when she gets taken home. So if we just kind of pushed it all forward so we don't see that ending and she's going to nursing school and she's fine, that would give you that happy ending, I think, that you're kind of searching for, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of her sorted. How does that then affect the events of what happens to Vivian? If she's doing fine, how does that help Vivian?
Well, it would be great if at some point Vivian got some life advice. Just a little bit, right? Yeah. Maybe you shouldn't be hanging around with this creepoid from next door.
Yes.
Okay. And I feel like if a level-headed Vivian was around, a level-headed Rita was around, she maybe could have stepped in and stopped this. No shade, right? I mean, hey, maybe the kid next door is an okay guy, but like I said before, he's obsessed with Charles Manson. He's a little bit of a creep weirdo guy. He's hanging around the apartment, hitting on younger girls. What's his deal? Don't want to know his deal. I'd like to scumbag him up a little bit. I'd like to make him a little more creepy. And I'd love Rita to step in and go, this guy's just like my ex guy who's a bad guy or something like that. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah, no, 100%, because she should have experience of people like that, right?
She does have experience. Totally, she's met sense. Bad people. Yeah.
So, okay. So she's going on a good track. This guy's going on a bad track. We've got Natasha Lyonne is kind of being supported by the two of them, like, you know, good guy, bad guy. What is the kind of most dramatic, crucial event that happens in this film?
Other than when Rita has to have her stomach pumped by the paramedics.
Yeah, I guess we could use that moment. What we essentially need is we need enough space after that moment to fix everything, rather than it being like that's kind of this really shocking moment that happens, and then from there it kind of just goes. Ugh. We want to be able to fix it. So if we get to that stage and she's made a big mistake and she's really messed up, how do we fix everything from there? How do their lives get better? What needs to happen?
You know, in my dream journal, you know, if I was to write down what I really want to happen, is it realistic? Probably not. Does it even make sense to the film? Who cares? Let me tell you what I think I want to have happen. I understand why the dad character feels so...
Undermined?
Undermined is probably good. He's trying to balance a lot of falsity around him, which is that he's successful even though he isn't. That he's a provider even though he isn't because he gets his money from his brother. That he's a good parent even though he kind of isn't because he's not present through a lot of the pivotal moments of his kids. He's not really connecting with them. There's a weird there's a very important flashback where they're talking about that famous steak story and when he ran a restaurant. And I guess to solve his financial issues and also to re-solidify him as the patriarch in this story, it'd be really great if the dad opens a restaurant and becomes the provider for the family again.
I think that's totally
way they don't have to travel anymore, right?
Yeah, because they're kids. There's only so much fixing they can do. I think you're right. I think it needs to be him that has the the real success at the end, which goes back to your theory about how he's actually what the story is about.
Right.
So
I could be wrong, but
No, well, hey, why not? It's a read. Every read is a read. Like it's if he's the one who figures it out, he goes out on his own. He finds something, like he makes his own restaurant, or he, has some kind of success. He cuts off his brother and goes, "No, I need to do this on my own. I need to support these kids. My kids, I need to step up."
You step up and be a
that
dad.
Allows everything else to fall into place, and I think that certainly, I think that fixes it.
And he would make those steaks that are this thick,
I think that's good.
Does that work?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Did we make it fun enough? Should they also have to go on a game show and like win a minivan or something?
Yeah, that as well. That's post credits.
Because otherwise they can't, drive to Sizzler. Cool. Well, I think we've solved it. There's only one more thing we need to do, and that is we need to rate this movie.
Okay.
Emma, I would love to know on a scale of 1 to 5, thick steaks. How many thick old steaks would you give the 1998 classic Slums of Beverly Hills?
I'm going to give this one 3.5. I was considering a 4.
Wow.
But I think what's interesting is what you said about how you felt a bit distanced from it and a bit confused by it.
Yeah.
So that's taken it down a little bit for me. But I thought it was really fun. I really enjoyed watching it. So 3.5 for me.
Nice.
How about you?
2.5. I remember really liking this movie. Watching it again, I liked it. But about 95% of the things that I liked about it was Natasha Lyonne. I wish I got it like a filmmaker, but I just sort of thought it was a bit boring. And I double screened a lot during this movie, and that's yeah, man. And I don't usually do that because I'm in my late 30s, so I can only focus on one screen at a time. But no shade. I thought the movie was good, but it didn't really land for me, and that's why I give it 2.5 steaks.
Nice. I think that's the first time I've liked one more than you like one. Maybe.
Yeah, isn't that wow? Yeah, yeah, that's weird. What happened there? Dear the 90s, we need to talk.
Yeah.
Hey, we could keep recording, but we need to get our stuff and get out of this place right now. Pack your bags. We gotta go.
Okay, I got my hairdryer around my neck. Let's go.
Don't mess with any of that stuff. Let's get in the car. Come on, let's get out of here.
Oh, God.
No! I love this apartment. Not anymore. You don't live here anymore. Thank you for listening to this episode of Plot Twisters.
Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts.
We'll see you next time.